Today we will be talking to you about Japan and one of the major problems it faces, the aging crisis. While being one of the world's largest economies, Japan has to wrestle with a variety of issues, many of which stem from the aging and thus shrinking of its population. But before we jump into the major issue we will be exploring, we want to give you an overview of Japan's economy and a bit of the history behind it.
In the decades after World War II, Japan developed a strong and technologically advanced economy. This was achieved through strong cooperation between the government and private companies, rapid advancements in technology, and a very small defense budget, limited to 1% of the GDP due to Japan's role in the Second World War. After the war, the Japanese economy was marked by two important points. First, there was a very close connection between the process of production, manufacture, and distribution of products in most of its industries, and secondly, job positions were granted to a large fraction of the labor force for life. Both of these facts are since becoming more or less obsolete. However, as global competition and changes in domestic demographics are pressuring the Japanese economy to give up these practices.
The country's industrial sector depends heavily on imported raw materials and fuels, while its small agricultural sector is highly subsidized by the government. Crop yields are among the highest in the world. Japan is self-sufficient in its production of rice, but imports about 60% of the food it consumes.
The economy as a whole experienced height of tremendous growth, with both the long-run aggregate supply and aggregate demand shifting out considerably after World War II, but has since slowed immensely. For roughly 30 years, the real economic growth has been impressive. A 10% average in the 1960s, a 5% average in the 1970s, 4% in the 1980s. This growth slowed in the 1990s, however, averaging just 1.7%. This dip in GDP growth was mostly due to an inefficient investment and an asset price bubble that appeared in the latter half of the 80s that required a very long time for firms to reduce excess debt, capital, and labor.
Though mild growth continued after the turn of the century, the Japanese economy has fallen into recession 3 times since 2008. Because of the worldwide economic crisis in 2008, the country experienced a severe downturn in business investment and global demand for Japanese products that caused its economy to dip into recession. While the government tried to remedy the situation through stimulus spending, which helped the economy recover between 2009 and 2010, the economy went south once more in 2011 when the 9.0 magnitude earthquake and the tsunami that ensued caused the manufacturing to drop. The economy has certainly gotten better since 2011 cataclysm, but it still struggles with certain very prevalent issues.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe made economic recovery his top priority. He halted previous Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda's plan to close nuclear power plants and is working towards economic revitalization through stimulus, monetary easing, and structural reform. While stimulus, a process in which government will spend money to shift the aggregate demand curve out, is undoubtedly the way to go in this situation, it can have an adverse effect such as severe inflation and the augmentation of debt. Currently, Japan's economy is suffering. Start over from there.
Currently, Japan's economy is suffering from deflation because of a weak yen and increasing costs of energy. Abe's new government will continue its debate on how to best restructure the economy and rein in the country's absolutely huge government debt, which currently exceeds 230% of GDP. To help raise revenue and reduce public debt, Japan decided in 2013 to gradually increase the consumption tax to a total of 10% by the year 2015. Though Japan's debt is at a worrisome point, where raising revenue may be necessary, the country is running a risk in increasing the tax. If people feel that prices are becoming higher and that they are less wealthy, they are likely to spend less money and thereby shift the aggregate supply curve in, potentially causing yet another recession.
In 2013, Japan decided to join in the negotiations concerning the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The TPP is a pact that would allow Japan's economy to be open to increased foreign competition and give Japanese businesses more opportunities to export. In 2013, Japan was ranked the 4th largest economy in the world.
Among the many long-term challenges for the Japanese economy are heavy reliance on exports to derive growth and an aging, shrinking population. Today we are going to focus on Japan's aging crisis. Now we want to give you an overview of Japan's aging crisis. So the growth of Japan's economy has been stalling since the 1990s, in part due to a huge demographic problem, aging. In 1989, only 11.6% of the population of Japan was over 65. In 2006, that number grew to 20%. In 2055, it is expected to reach 38%. Indeed, the country's fertility rate is at a mere 1.42 children per woman. With such a large proportion of people dropping out of the workforce, Japan has been having trouble increasing its production. If we look at the AD and AS graph, we see a leftward shift of the aggregate supply curve. While the demand curve would likely shift in as well due to the dwindling population, the bottom line is clear. It is hard for the economy not to shrink, let alone grow. As the pool of retirees grows each year in Japan, the government also has to spend more and more money on social security and pension programs. Furthermore, Japan has the highest life expectancy in the world, with an average life expectancy of 83.10 years. Japanese women have an average life expectancy of roughly 86 years. While this is a great sign of health for the country, it also means that the gap between retirement and death is much larger than in most countries, which in turn means that the government has to spend a lot more money to support its elderly population. All public welfare programs in Japan, including public pension and health, cost 5.77% of national income in 1970. In 2012, it was 31.34%. This number is expected to rise further and accounts for the rising debts Japan is facing, currently 230% of its GDP. Japan must combat aging if it hopes to remain competitive in the world market and regain growth in its economy and a grip on its ever-expanding debts.
Among the solutions we propose are the following. Provide ways for elderly between 65 and 75 to work in less demanding, part-time ways. Perhaps some could even work taking care of those over 75 years. This would require an increased government spending to create these jobs.
We would also want to reform the type of healthcare that is provided to elderly people by the government. A lot of people that suffer from the simple processes of aging or chronic lifestyle-related problems get full coverage for extremely expensive treatments that do little to nothing when it comes to curing the unavoidable side effects of aging. If coverage for extremely expensive and unnecessary procedures was not provided, part of the money could be used to help more people with cases of infectious diseases or physical trauma. Essentially, we want to shift the focus of healthcare from providing for old age problems to problems people of any age could suffer from. This wouldn't require a decrease or increase in healthcare spending. It would simply be a reallocation of resources in order to make the system more efficient.
The retirement age is currently 60 in Japan, with some benefits provided to retirees even younger than that. Raising the retirement age by 2 to 4 years over the period of a few years would dramatically reduce the costs of pension programs for the government. This decrease in government spending would allow money to be used in other areas.
The aging situation in Japan could benefit from a slight increase of tax rates on people in the upper class who could have more than 2 children but do not choose to do so. Such an increase in taxes could have 2 benefits. One, it would increase revenue for the government that could be used for programs to boost fertility rate. And secondly, it could create a financial incentive to have more than 2 children. The danger in increasing taxes, however, is once more that it may shift the aggregate demand curve left, thereby creating a recession. If the tax is to be applied, it should be raised gradually and not represent a very large fraction of people's incomes.
Though these policies may seem cruel, they are necessary to remedy Japan's problems. Some of the money the government would save or generate through these changes could be used in the following ways. 1. Japan could increase spending on education to teach people the importance of building a family and encourage them to do so. 2. Money could be allocated to improve programs that make it easier to take care of children. These programs include better quality and cheaper daycare services, cheaper childcare services, large tax breaks for families with more than 2 children, and others.
Another solution we propose is to make Japan's immigration laws less strict in order to increase the amount of foreign workers that come into the economy, thereby increasing Japan's workforce and rebuilding Japan's export industry.
The final remedy that we would propose is to improve Japan's terrible workplace inequality through legislation that would encourage women to pursue both careers and family lives.
While the solutions we propose should help remedy the aging problem, it is actually very hard to implement such measures in the country. It is a growing trend among young Japanese people to see sex as uncool and a superficial way to express feelings, making the problem partly tied to culture. Furthermore, Japan is a country that has deep respect for the elderly and would likely frown upon the implementation of any measures that would reduce the quality of care provided to old people. Also, while the governing party is strong, this debate has raged for decades, and it is unclear how difficult it would be to create political consensus around these ideas.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed.